Hey, everyone. So yeah, I'm going to be talking today about family remedies and how important they are. I want to ask you, do you have any herbs or herbal remedies that have been passed down in your family that you use? And you might think, oh yeah, that's kind of nice, but it's actually really, I'm finding more and more that it's really important. So I just sent out an email to my email list, and I just asked everybody on my list, like, hey, how can I serve you better? What do you want to learn about? What would you like next from me? I'm getting ready to create a new course. People, came back with all kinds of things, especially some really kind things, like just keep doing what you're doing. It was really nice. However, the most common thing that I heard was, I'm overwhelmed, or how do you know, just like there's a lot of confusion and overwhelm. And some people feel like they're just starting. Some people that are even been doing it for a while are like, there's just so much information. So the thing is and also not, the biggest thing I heard is people feeling like they never know enough. Like, when do you know enough herbal remedies? When do you know enough about herbal medicine? So I want to go to bat on this a little bit. And, I even had this experience last year where I was invited to an event and there were several herbalists there, and there was an herbalist there who she's probably about 15 years older than I am. She'd been teaching herbal medicine longer than I had. She just, an amazing elder herbalist. And we were talking and she started saying, oh, I feel like I need to learn more. I need to learn about this. And she'd been teaching herbal medicine for 40 years, impacted thousands of people's lives, just been an amazing herbal teacher. And here she is telling me, like, oh, I feel like I don't know enough. There's all this stuff coming in. I feel like I need to learn. I was just like, oh my gosh. You too, even you, great herbal elder, you're feeling like you need to know more. I'm done with that. And so there are some things that I figured out over the years that help people feel satisfied. Because if we're always feeling unsatisfied with our herbal knowing, our herbal knowledge, our healing knowledge, if we're never quite satisfied, what does that mean in how we heal, how we help people? Like we like it, but then we're always just kind of like, right? So we want to really deal with that. And so there's many different things, but today I want to talk about family remedies. And instead of feeling, some people just like to know it all and they're going to study forever. I mean, I'm a perpetual student. But one of the things that I've seen help people feel a level of deeper satisfaction is when they can connect with a family or an ancestral remedy, okay? And so for some of you, you're like, oh, my grandmother used herbs. We used herbs in my family. I know what that is. That is awesome. Some people are like, I have no clue. Nobody used herbs in my family. I have nothing. So wherever you're at, what I want you to do is just realize that's there, that you're here because your ancestors figured out how to use herbs and food to stay well and heal themselves. And so you might have to go back a little ways, but somewhere in your family line is somebody that was interested in herbs and food besides you, right? What we want to do is see if you can connect with that, if you can find a remedy that's in your family. And so you might think, there is none. But what if there's anybody alive in your family, even somebody your age or anybody older, you might think there's no remedy. But after having worked with, thousands of my students and really given them the homework of going home and asking who in your family has used herbal remedies, asking anybody if they remember. Do you remember an aunt? Do you remember a grandmother? Is there somebody that knew your aunts or your grandmothers that's still alive? Like, so maybe they're not still alive, but maybe somebody that knew them. Maybe there's a cookbook somewhere. I've had many students find like kind of hidden recipes in their mom's old cookbook, right? But I want you to start asking either your siblings. So if there's nobody for you to ask, like, okay, I understand that, you maybe ask a neighbor, ask an elder neighbor. But we're going to focus today on family. So if you have any siblings, if you have any aunties or uncles or grandmothers or anybody older than you, I want you to ask them, hey, do you remember anybody using any kind of herb for anything? Okay. So I asked this question of my family when I was in my early 20s, and everybody's like, no, what are you talking about, Cammie? Herbs was not popular like it is now, like they are now. And they're like, no. And then I don't know how many years into being an herbalist, one day my grandfather just said, oh yeah, my mom used such and such and such. And I was just like, oh, wow, I would have liked to have known that before, but thank you. Sometimes you have to wait for them to spill the beans, right? So he talked about his mom making onion syrup when the kids coughed. So she had 6 children, and she took care of all kinds of nieces. There were lots of kids. And he said that the first time anybody would let out any cough, she put onions on top of the stove and water, and she made onion syrup, and everybody had to drink it because she knew not to wait, right? So sometimes you have to wait, okay? Sometimes you have to just put it out there and say, and ask the question and then see what comes back to you. And so if you're joining me right now and you know of an ancestral remedy or a family remedy or a family herb that's been used in your family, I would love for you to post it in the chat. I'd like to hear that. And it's really important, even if it's one herb. Now, you may not get the onion syrup story about your great grandmother out of I was really lucky to get that story, actually, because if nobody had been asking, it would be gone. But the other thing you can do is just start to think about what foods. Do you have any traditional foods? Do you have are there any traditional dishes that you cook or prepare that your mother or your grandmother or your grandfather or somebody in your family line prepared? So that's the other way to access that. And so sometimes, we forgot the remedies. We forgot the cold and flu remedies. We forgot, just the healing herbal remedies. But sometimes you'll find they're hidden in a dish. Right? So my grandmother, my great-grandmother, they all, were Irish. They definitely made that whole corned beef and cabbage thing is for real. So my mom, she didn't really cook that much with herbs, but when she made that corned beef and cabbage, she had a recipe, and it had that mustard seed. And so there's just a little bit of herbal lineage there, right? And also keep asking. So again, pretty far into my herbal life, at one point my aunt on my mother's side, my great-grandmother, that story was from my father's side of the family. My aunt came to me with a story about my great-grandmother on my mom's side, and she said that she used to use horehound for coughs. And she said she used to make compresses for her chickens and heal her chickens, but she didn't remember what herb it was. But so now I know, that my great-grandmothers on both sides, they had herbal knowledge. And, pretty much prior to 1930, you didn't just go to the doctor, right? So women, families, they had to have their herbal knowledge. And so the knowledge from your parents and your grandparents was important. And if you're studying herbal medicine, again, one of the biggest things is that I hear from most people is this thing about overwhelm. And one of the reasons is because we're trying to do a massive catch-up, right? We are trying to learn a body of knowledge that actually takes generations. Our ancestors, their herbal knowledge was generational. It didn't just happen in one lifetime. And so we used to inherit a body of knowledge that was generated over several generations. And then there was that cultural disconnect. We lost it, we gave it up, and now we're trying to catch up. And so I hear so many people talk about being overwhelmed, and this is one of the reasons why we gave it up, and now we're trying to catch up. We're trying to do several generations of work in 20 years. And so my advice is just I have a lot of techniques to help people feel more satisfied in their herbal studies, but one of them, the one we're talking about today, is to take some time and see if you can access a family remedy or a family herb, and know that those herbs sometimes are hidden in your food. So let's say you have a special recipe that was handed down. I want you to look in that recipe and see what herbs are in that recipe. And that herb might be from your family lineage of what your ancestors used. So start asking and look in those old cookbooks and look in the old recipes and let people know that you're interested. And sometimes it takes a couple years to get the story. But see, the thing is, once you have even just one family herb or one memory of an herbal medicine that your ancestors used, that gives you something like, oh, okay, that's from me. That's from my line. That's from my family. My ancestors developed a relationship with that. And your body, you remember that. Your body remembers. And so then you can just focus on those one or two things. Instead of thinking you have to learn 50 herbs, you can spend some time even just focusing on that. And it'll create so much more satisfaction. There's another, so here's another thing that happened that I didn't realize this was a family herb, a family herbal kind of lineage until my son was born. So one day, my mom had taken my son out for a walk around the block during the springtime. I think he was 2 or 3, and he came home chewing on sour grass. I mean, do you know sour grass? I mean, if it doesn't grow where you live, then you don't know about it, but it's really sour with a yellow flower. And he came home chewing on sour grass, and I was like, wow. And my mom had taught him that you chew on sour grass, and her mom had taught her. My grandmother taught me that. My great-grandmother taught me that. And here was my mom, just, it was just kind of this little thing, but she had taught my son sour grass and how to chew on it. And, the sour flavor is amazing. Sour foods help to, they kind of liquefy toxins and help you digest your food. And so it's just a great thing for kids to chew on a little bit. They're not going to overdo it because it's too sour. But here, just this simple thing, I'm sure my great-grandmother, her mother taught her, right? So now when I see that sour grass, I remember my grandmother. I remember my grandfather teaching me to chew on that. So maybe it's something simple like that. But one of the ways to deal with this, like, oh my God, I have to learn all the herbs. What am I going to learn? What am I going to do? Is to connect with one of your family if you can find even one herb. I have another story. I have a friend, her family, nobody's using herbs now. Nobody's interested. They've kind of let the whole thing go. And again, if you have a family member, if you have a family herb that you remember, or even an herb or spice that's been used in a food that your family makes, let me know. Type it in the chat. I want to hear. I love hearing this. I love this whole ancestral remedy conversation. So this woman that I know, none of her children, none of her nobody's interested in herbs, and she doesn't have any of the herbal knowledge, but her grandmother did. And she remembers her grandmother using calendula, and she doesn't really remember what for, and she doesn't really remember how, and all that kind of stuff, right? But I remember being at her house, and there was a gathering, like a barbecue there, and her family was there, and the calendula was blooming. And you know what she said? She said, see, my mom always shows up. My grandmother always shows up when we gather. See the calendula? It's blooming. So even though she didn't remember what the calendula was for, that plant, that connection, she remembered her grandmother and her mother using that plant. And it sparked something. It created an ancestral, created this good feeling and this memory. So I told her, you need to tell your children that. You need to tell your grandchildren that, because one of them will take that story and pick it up. And eventually there will be one person in your family that will be the person that is the herbalist. That's the person that carries that knowledge, and they'll be interested and they'll pick it up. Okay, so maybe it's even something like that. Maybe it's a special flower that somebody in your family line always grew or always. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to bat with this feeling that I've heard from just hundreds of people that I've talked to, and herbalists and students, where they get to the point where it just feels like too much. There's too many herbal recipes. There's too many. I mean, I'm guilty too. I mean, my book, The Herbal Kitchen, has 250 recipes in it. I don't know, maybe I've made every single one of them in there, but it's a lot. And at some point we have to find a few herbs that go really deep, where we feel really satisfied in a connection with, okay? So I would love to hear what who you're going to ask, and what you come up with, when you start asking people what herbs were used in your family, what herbs were used in recipes, what flowers were special, and to just get that conversation rolling, and also try to get it rolling when even when there are younger people around, so that they can hear the conversation too, so that whoever in the next generation is supposed to pick this up will start picking it up sooner than later. Because see, for me, I had to start from scratch. I never even heard the word herbal medicine or natural remedies until I was in my early 20s, and I had to just pick it up and start from the very beginning. And again, that's part of the reason why we're feeling so much overwhelm, is because we're trying to pick up generations of knowledge in 5 years or something. Okay, so there we have it for today. Let me just see if there's any comments, if you have any comments or questions. Okay, Katya, hi. Okay, so my grandmother used to soak a cotton rag in vinegar, sprinkled it with black pepper, and put it on my forehead for a fever. Also would slice raw onions and put them on feet for a cold. Yeah. I'm so glad. How does that feel to have a remedy from your grandmother? And what kind of feeling does that create? I was just, just the few that I have, I'm like, oh, I love that. I just love that piece being put in place, right? Because it's our heritage, it's our human heritage. We are meant to be deeply connected with the plants. It's only just this recent thing that everything comes from the store, right? So we have our DNA, everything in us is wired to be deeply connected to the plants and what we do with the plants. And so if we can remember that and get one or two of those remedies, so that's good. Raw onions, raw onions will draw out an infection. And so you're so lucky to have your grandmother's remedy. And so the other thing is I know many people that they have some remedies from their grandmother, or their grandmother or their mother knows herbal remedies, but they don't know everything their mother or grandmother knows. So that's the other thing. If you've got an elder that's alive, that's got that knowledge, a lot of times that knowledge is, again, like I've been talking about, it's generational. So you want to get it. You want to know what they know. Let's see, and it works. Katya's saying, and it works. I've since had the confidence to make my own cold remedy with garlic and thyme, and they work too. Good. So you have that foundation, right? And now you can build on it. And see, the thing is that the students that I've met, I've been teaching for almost 30 years, and the students that I have that were raised with herbal remedies, they kind of get a quicker start. And I've seen most of them have more confidence than people who just start out. So for me, it really has taken me a long time to get the confidence, like to feel confident, because I didn't learn it when I was young. I didn't have my grandmother's, I learned this from my grandmother. This is what you do, right? I have other things that I learned from my grandmother that are just like in my bones, right? Because that's what I learned from her, and I loved her so much. And so when you have that remedy, and it's like it instills a confidence, and that's again why I have a really big mission of us raising up the next generation knowing how to use herbs and work with the earth, because it's just a lot harder, and it takes a lot longer to build that confidence when we start from scratch. So that's great. So see, what you're saying to me is so valuable for other people to listen to, because building confidence is one of the biggest struggles that I hear people like, well, I just don't have the confidence. And it takes time. It takes time. And one of the reasons some people have more confidence is because when you're raised with it, and you have, you learned it from your mother and your grandmother, you're going to start out more confident. So it's true. Yeah, when I meet people that grew up using herbs, their confidence level is just they're in a completely different place. We're going to just keep working on the issues to help you feel more confident and at ease and comfortable with your herbal studies.